Chapter 9, Psychotherapy, the journey from moralism to telling the truth. Many of the people who go to therapists or physicians seeking relief are tired. They are tired from having worked out their lives in such a way that they get worn out instead of recharged by living. When someone like this takes responsibility for exercise, nutrition, and rest, a number of their psychological problems disappear. The human body has a wonderful capacity to restore itself if it is given a break from abuse and a chance to rest. Wellness is a natural state of being for people who have learned how to get out of their own way. People's health is a result of many factors, including their genetic inheritance, the environment in which they live, their lifestyles, and the health care they receive. Much of the health care in our culture, and particularly in the profit-based dysfunctional healthcare system in the United States, has been and still is illness care, aimed at restoring ability to function once it has been lost. We have all learned that this is not good enough, but we are still learning how to maintain good health and prevent disease without moralism crippling the attempt. Sometimes I see people working out or jogging with expressions on their face that look like their minds are eating them alive at the time. I imagine their suffering for the sake of good health is hard on their health. A brief historical note. What we consider to be a normal amount of stimulation for an average human being is far greater than what was considered normal during all of previous human history. Quite recently, there has been a change in the way humans live. For the greater part of human history, most people lived harder, shorter, and less hyperstimulated lives. Although there were emotional peaks of joy or terror, the average level of stimulation was relatively low. There was time for life to pass through cycles in which tension alternated with periods of rest and regeneration. Life followed the seasons, and the daily cycle of light and dark had greater influence on how one lived. After the Industrial Revolution, the tempo of change quickened, and destabilizing new experience became more frequent. The interludes of regeneration shorter. Today, we are battered by an endless stream of stimuli, and for many of us, the unregenerated nervous system maintains in a state of persistent tension. Human biochemistry has not adapted to the radical change in lifestyle. Our bodies were not designed to do what we do. As the body system organized themselves to respond to the incessant persistence of stimulation without reprieve, their flexibility and function begin to be impaired. The impairment in the natural flexibility of the dynamic systems of the body eventually manifests itself as disease. At best, we are open to diseases of overstimulation. At worst, we are victims of serious stress disorders that can kill. The progression from a normal work relaxation cycle to disease of overstimulation to stress disorders can be described like this. Normal stimulation and rest cycle. There is a balance of tension when appropriate to do work, to defend against threat, to play, and relaxation to regenerate energy. Diseases of overstimulation without reprieve. Insomnia, fatigue, jitteriness, inability to relax, inability to concentrate, boredom, creative blocks, depression, and being overweight are some of the symptoms. The nervous system is stuck in a mild but persistent fight or flight tension state. Smooth muscle tissue cannot relax. Internal biochemistry has adapted to this state and maintains it. Stress disorders. Stress disorders are the logical extension of diseases of overstimulation. These are chronic insomnia, psychosomatic illnesses, high blood pressure, hypertension, paranoid fantasies, hypersensitivity, and death by apoplexy. The machine begins to kill itself, slowly or quickly. There are a number of different treatment procedures that work effectively to bring about a reduction of stress and a restoration of the natural process of regeneration. We are seeing the dawn of a new era of healing in which physical health and psychological well-being are synonymous. People who are not psychologically poisoned and hurt themselves. Good grief. Okay. People who are not well psychologically poison and hurt themselves physically. Some of the ways we poison and hurt ourselves are a part of our tradition. 3 of the commonly accepted forms of treatment for stress are alcohol, dope, and food. The poor person's tranquilizers. Stress is most often dealt with only after it has become acute. Only when the unremitting presence of tension is manifest as a disorder or disease do we speculate that perhaps we need to relax. Out of our learned numbness, we allow stress to accumulate, further numbing our innate aliveness. Alcohol and drugs provide a temporary respite from our life-numbing, distracting minds. After the respite from our minds comes the hangover or the letdown. When this form of relief becomes habitual, greater stress is always the result, because people become obsessively attached to some form of relief that is poisonous. This is the vicious cycle of addiction. Permanent addiction to temporary relief occurs, particularly if drugs or alcohol contrast strongly enough with whatever alternatives people have for relief from their own minds. Entrapment in the ghetto of the mind is a worse alternative than addiction for most addicts, so they stay addicted. Alcoholism cuts across all classes because the self-torture of moralism cuts across all classes. One of the reasons the temporary relief of being drunk gets to be so precious is that getting drunk knocks one's conscience in the head. For a while, the goddamn moralist within shuts up. That is wonderful for a little while, but when you sober up, the moralist within works overtime. Then the payback is not just a hangover, it's a hangover in church. For this, you need immediate relief, so you hit the bottle again. A vicious cycle. Well-being is the antithesis of this cycle. Well-being starts with the dawning realization that you are being helplessly buffeted from non-awareness to sickness to temporary relief, and that despite your efforts to take care of yourself, you still end up in this vicious cycle. When any client gets more than temporary relief from his or her learned system of culturally approved self-destructive behavior, then psychotherapy has worked. When people stop getting drunk or stoned or high incessantly and enjoy themselves more when they do those things occasionally, they have clearly started taking better care of themselves. There is no reason not to drink alcohol and smoke marijuana if you keep in good physical shape by working out, and if you don't have to have them to be happy. We have all experienced well-being and have memories of times we felt whole and full and fine. Well-being has to be continually relearned and re-experienced through a redirection of attention away from the preconceptions of the mind toward the experiences of excitement in the body. Once well-being as a continual process of noticing and rediscovery has been learned, the way a person spends time and what he or she does in his or her life changes noticeably. Well-being is not taught in schools, by parents, or by the church. Well-being is self-taught using guidance from people who don't know much more about it than you do. Diet, exercise, and psychological healing programs can support people in learning to create wellness as a natural, ongoing state of being. This approach is radically different from the typical moralism of the usual try harder to do good approach. In fact, such moralism is a primary source of injury and ill health among health freaks. Show me a moralist, and I'll show you someone who doesn't know how to take care of him or herself. Only if people can learn to undo their dumb ways of trying to take care of themselves by shooting all over themselves, they can heal more naturally by letting up. If you're tired and sick, take a break. Take it easy. Don't worry. Be happy. Some people will relearn how to take care of themselves, and some won't. Some of us in the helping professions who deal with stressed out people know that not everyone will be successful in overcoming the ways of surviving that are killing them. We know that regardless of our best efforts to provide a place and a way of being that gives people the best chance to interrupt themselves on the road to slow suicide, many won't even slow their pace. Nevertheless, when the intervention does work, this is how it is done. Regardless of what or how the person is thinking, we interrupt the person's mind, then begin a conversation about personal power based on noticing rather than on thinking. When that conversation gets started, it will sometimes last a lifetime. Most of the walking wounded can't tell down from up anymore. Because of self-crippling, people will continue to cripple themselves with any self-improvement program. We have to interrupt their mechanical replication of their own suffering before we can do anything other than waste time trying to teach them anything new. After that interruption, we can teach people the nuts and bolts of taking care of themselves. For this reason, telling the truth is central to all activities and programs of self-improvement. The source of personal power is the ability to interrupt your own mind. And since having things to hide keeps you in your racing mind and keeps it racing, you have to reveal what you have hidden. The whole being that each of us includes, but is not limited to, the mind. Nothing interrupts the mind like telling the truth. My judgment about whether therapy works is based on a few assumptions about what the job is, which I will now make explicit. Psychotherapy and how it works when it does. All illnesses, whether psychological or physical, are stress-related. Any complete job of psychotherapy must produce an observable and measurable change in physical tension, a decrease in the form of psychological misery the person first reports, and no new misery to take its place. Both the therapist and the client must perceive a decrease in the psychological misery complained about in the beginning. Equally important, other people who knew the client before therapy must notice that the person is more rested, more at ease, and less miserable, and not just screwed up in a new way. Therapy doesn't always work. Sometimes when it does work, it works only for a while, and then the person degenerates back to living out of more bullshit. This time about how well therapy worked, and loses whatever relearning occurred. What happens when therapy works and keeps on working is that people want to learn about how to stay well. They become interested in living in the world by constantly renewing their leases on life rather than by being lost in their minds. They can do that best within the context of a sustaining community of people in the same boat, people who have created wellness and are committed to maintaining wellness. Individuals who attain some new health and well-being need the support of such a community of friends, or the individual fades back into the cultural woodwork we are all dying from. It is from a position of support by a group of such people, friends, colleagues, and former clients of mine, that I write this book. As I have worked with people under stress over the years, I have become more interested in life management on the physical and immediate level, and less interested in the intricacies of deep psychological meaning. It is through this interest that I have discovered the practical value of telling the truth. For about 8 years, I worked with and co-led groups with a psychiatrist who was without a doubt a genius, but whose life was incredibly screwed up and remained so for as long as I knew him. He worked 12 hours a day, suffered from every bodily ailment known to man, went bankrupt every 7 years, owed the IRS hundreds of thousands of dollars, couldn't keep a decent relationship going longer than a week, and was generally one of the poorer examples in this world of how to make life work. He treated his body like shit. He gave out advice to the tune of $300,000 a year, but his life didn't work. He didn't have time to take care of himself at the most basic level because he believed physical maintenance was a waste of time. He was great to talk to, and we had wonderful conversations about Joseph Campbell and the Sufis and personal and cultural mythology. But he was a pathetically miserable son of a bitch, and the best living proof I've seen that our minds' attempts to finally solve life's meaning are in no way related to the good life. When we started out, he was my mentor. Later, we became colleagues. Eventually, he was in therapy with me. The therapy was unsuccessful because he always knew the answer to everything, so there was no need to experiment with anything different. He didn't understand what anyone's grandmother could have told him. If you take care of your physical health, you do better. And if you don't, no matter how smart you are, you won't be very happy. However, people don't take care of themselves out of knowing that they should. I had a friend whose doctor told him to lose 15 pounds. When he went back for his next physical, he had gained 10 pounds instead, and his doctor kicked him out of his office, saying, "If you aren't willing to take care of yourself, why in the hell should I?" That doctor was my doctor for years, and I appreciate him for his anger and for his integrity. Still, despite this doctor's good intentions, my friend had to have a heart attack before he could learn to take care of himself. Fortunately, he didn't die and is in good shape today. I too have kicked a lot of people out of my office saying, "If you won't take care of yourself, to hell with you." What bothers me more and more is that even though we are right, if we kicked everyone out who deserved being kicked out for not cooperating with us for his or her own good, there might not be anyone left, including ourselves. Learning to take care of ourselves creatively rather than resentfully is a big step in growing up. I'm going to say that again. Learning to take care of ourselves creatively rather than resentfully is a big step in growing up. When we take such good care of ourselves that we have all we need, the overflow to generosity with others is possible. Prior to that, nurturing relationships between or among adults are not possible. Prior to that, all gifts are bribes. Everything has a string attached because you need something from the person you are giving the supposedly free gift to. Most people won't give up on trying to force others to take care of them because they won't forgive their early caretakers for not having done a perfect job. Forgiveness is critical to physical and psychological health. I'm going to read that again. Most people won't give up on trying to force others to take care of them because they won't forgive their early caretakers for not having done a perfect job. Forgiveness is critical to physical and psychological health. When people can spend more time in the pleasant and lighter experiential continuum than in the miserable semi-darkness of the mind, they are healthier. The primary, fundamental, essential baseline, critical, lowest level minimum requirement for happiness, without which there is no other hope, is a willingness to take care of oneself. The trouble is, people are generally willing to take care of almost anyone or anything else but themselves. They will take care of a car, house, child, job, pet, boss, deadline, spouse, stranger, or any number of people and things on an endless list before they take care of themselves. Repeated observation of this phenomenon has led me to the conclusion that there is a particular unlearning required for human growth to continue beyond adolescence, and most people don't unlearn it. What must be unlearned is the habit of being lost in value judgments that override experience. Many teenagers would rather look cool while freezing to death waiting for the bus than wear a warm jacket that is not as in as the shirt they are wearing. Most people don't grow beyond such adolescent tricks with or without therapy. Most therapists are still adolescents themselves and therefore don't know what the job is. Many people are trapped at a certain stage of development, cut off from an essential feedback system that would naturally allow them to take care of themselves. The feedback system is built into all of us, but we have dissociated ourselves from it. The system requires that we pay attention to excitement in the body rather than concepts in the mind. We all have the capacity to be aware of various forms of excitement in our bodies, but we don't pay much attention to that because we are too busy thinking and shoulding on ourselves. For many of us, the older we get, the worse we are at taking care of ourselves. This is partly because we have learned too much about what we should do, and it blocks our ability to live based on what we notice. Rather than attending to what we know we should do, we can pay attention to our bodies, our ongoing biofeedback system, and operate according to that, rather than our memories of what we learned before. Getting unstuck. If you don't take good care of yourself, find a therapist. Find a good one who agrees with what I have just said. One clue to assist you in finding a therapist or a group to support you in staying whole and healthy is this: just talking is not enough. Talking therapies alone are obsolete and on the way out. Any therapist that conspires with your mind to try to help you think your way out of unhealth is not going to help you. I will give you some examples of more than just talking therapy in this chapter. I combine techniques that many other professionals use separately, and I string them together in such a way that the combination works more powerfully than any of the separate treatments alone. I will outline a typical first 10 sessions or so to illustrate. When I begin seeing a new client, I listen and observe, get a feel for the person, and get a list of his or her complaints. Usually, there is something pressing, some depth of depression or anxiety that has been insoluble longer than people can tolerate. So they break down and try therapy. Usually, they are tired, so I work with them fairly early on to restore their bodies and help them recover from fatigue. I sometimes use polarity therapy, a pressure point technique similar to reflexology and acupuncture. I pull their toes and put pressure on certain spots above connective tissue to teach their bodies directly how to relax. Many people don't consider lying on the floor getting their feet squeezed to be psychotherapy, so I get to violate their expectations right away. I don't know if the theories about energy behind polarity therapy or acupressure are correct or not, but I do know from doing polarity therapy for years that it works to relax people whether they want to relax or not. It hurts a little bit. Many work just because I teach people to relax unnecessary tension in the rest of their body in order to decrease pain in the spot where I'm pushing. It may be that just the tensing and relaxing that naturally occurs when someone is hurting your toes results in an overall relaxation. It may be that people learn that an appropriate way to deal with physical pain is to be fully willing to experience the pain where it hurts, and instead of tensing up the rest of their body in response to the pain, to relax the rest of their body and to take what they get. And they generalize that to the psychological domain. Whatever the cause, people are more relaxed after I've worked on them for 30 minutes than they were before. They feel better and can sleep and get rested that very night. They have also learned something about how resistance causes pain to persist and surrender causes pain to decrease. Any problems I notice in the dynamic of holding on and letting go in the body usually show up as well when they describe their relationships to people, money, and time. This fact becomes evident in conversation when I continue the process. This period of hearing their complaints and teaching them to start work on themselves rather than on those complained about lasts 2 or 3 sessions. This sometimes takes longer if they get pissed off or shocked that their way of being about their complaints, rather than what's being complained about, is the source of the problem and the focus of therapy. Also, in this first phase, I often ask clients to allow me to hypnotize them. Right after the polarity therapy work is a good time for this, because they are already deeply relaxed. While they are in a trance state, I teach them self-hypnosis and suggest that they will get very good at it through regular practice at home. As a part of the hypnotic induction, I explain to them very thoroughly some of the functions of the involuntary nervous system and the power of the unconscious mind in self-healing. I remind them again of another method of control they have used before but forgotten, the method of control through surrender. I teach them to relax and let the involuntary nervous system run things without interference, because it does the most important work anyway. They get the message that they can start taking care of themselves based on what they notice about themselves when they relax and pay attention. If they are tired, as many of them are, they can rest. If they are hungry, they can eat. If they are thirsty, they can drink. If they feel shitty, they can do things to feel better. This is what Wilhelm Reich called orgasmic self-regulation. When I just tell people this, most of them will agree in theory and still not do it. If I teach them self-hypnosis and have them notice their noticing, sometimes from practicing noticing, the lesson actually soaks in.